Strategy is everywhere. Strategy in action infers process, intent, and outcomes. To create and deliver strategy, I think there are 8 underlying elements that we want to consider. So exploration, this is the curiosity, making sense of context, thinking about what's happening around us. Service is the delivery of value, so creating and delivering value. Influence, that's the why. Why does this matter? And how do we actually communicate that to the players in any kind of system? Strategy is actually a meaningful and mindful process to work towards those outcomes that we want. Insight is about curiosity, about creating hunches, understanding context, starting to put together where we're at and how are things progressing. Design is where it starts to become much more concrete. We start to put in places, create visuals, create processes, create templates and models that we can explore and iterate to move forward. Communication, of course, is constantly about buy-in. It's about motivation. And innovation underpins all of this, because we might be creating something that's a minor change, or it might be, a complete discontinuous innovation, as we call it. So completely change the way that we do things, and the system that we use. Now that's all very well, but underpinning those 8 elements, we need to find ways to bring insights and move things forward and actually understand where we're at. I think of it like this. To begin with, there are systems and processes and building blocks that we can use to actually explore each one of these. At the same time, there are 4 overall underlying fundamental principles of creating, designing and delivering on strategy. And these are the concept of lifetime value, the meaning and the value received over time by whoever the recipient is. The congruence model, so how we design organizations and systems to deliver success. Scenario thinking models about how we can explore the impact of changing variables, and then some kind of structured change model. So let's have a look at those in a little more detail. I love the concept of a Rubik's Cube, because that inferring that we just change one piece, one flick, and we've actually changed the entire face of the Rubik's Cube. In fact, I prefer them when they're all messy and the colors are all over the place. That makes a lot more sense to me. So the long-term value that we receive, it doesn't matter if you're a family planning a vacation, or if you're the CEO or the Chief Innovation Officer or whatever of a global healthcare company, these principles work, these 4 principles and then these elements. And this matters because we focus on what the profit or the outcome is. What's the value that we receive? It doesn't mean dollars. It means whatever is desirable and meaningful to the participants. Strategic fit. Do we actually have the capabilities, the resources, and everything that we need to create this long-term value? And then do we actually understand tenure? Do we know that things change over time? Do we have a concept of time? And then if we move down to this congruence model, and this is a beautiful way of actually understanding leadership. That might be some family member who's driving this process, or it can be literally the chairperson of a global company. So do we have leadership and strategic fit? Do these pieces, do we have an organization? Do we have systems and processes and culture and people to deliver on that? If we do, we call that congruent. If we don't, so that there's a lack of congruence, so there's inconsistency, there's dissonance in this system. Where is it? What can we do about it? How do we fix it? And oh, by the way, are we delivering on something that's in place and we're enhancing it, or we're creating something completely new? So are we doing blue circle work or green triangle work? So these are the big picture overarching pieces, still underpinned by various building blocks. Now we want to move into much more tangible elements of strategy, design and delivery, so strategy in action. So to me, this symbolizes always my thinking about scenario thinking. Doesn't mean that there are just 4 various scenarios, there are multiple scenarios, infinite number of scenarios. In fact, if you're using autonomous models. So this is where we can conceptually bring to life opportunities, different concepts, different ways of doing things. A business model canvas, for example, is a very lovely way to make this very visual and active. And it can be a family model canvas, all sorts of models to work here. And I always put this as bringing to life, and I call it some kind of conjoint analysis where we're exploring the impact of variables. And then we always need a change model. To me, change is just an element of what we do. I don't particularly like those linear models. I like these interactive models that have a system and a process. I'll just touch on this a little bit. So this idea of the ideal, we always start in the intentional change model by Atsis with what does great look like? What would it feel like? What would it look like? What even might it smell like? What's the underpinning senses of this? And do we have what we need to create that? And if we don't, what do we need to do? How do we test this along the way? How do we build capability? How do we understand where we're going? And this big circle in the middle is about trust, about building efficacious trust. And trust ultimately in systems, organizations, family is about behavior. There's another piece, the SECI model, and I'll keep those that acronym for another time, designed by Professor Nonaka and Mr. Toyota, the founder of Toyota Motors. And it's a beautiful system, SECI, about surfacing the implicit capabilities that we have, making them explicit in a shared way, then leveraging those, creating new ways of thinking and doing, new capabilities, and then embedding those so then they become again implicit and we start the entire system again. So that's the overall underpinning principles of strategy in action. And then there is a whole series of tools and processes, building blocks really, of the strategy and action system. What I've tried to do, so here are the 8 that I mentioned right at the beginning, and I've sort of, in a way, grouped them under each of these parts of. But to me, this is not a linear process. This is a start somewhere, explore something, perhaps explore your own capability, some success stories from your past and present, and what does that bring? You might also think about the strengths of the team, or you might do some kind of analysis of external trends. Somewhere in this system you'll start, and away we go with building strategy in action for something that's meaningful to you.